All right. I'm going to go ahead and ask you three questions. If at any point you need clarification on any of them, just let me know. For the first question, why should we even talk politics? What's the point when so many people have dug their heels in regarding their beliefs?
Um, well, I think because we innately react to each other, and we're influenced by our environment or who we listen to, right? Like I'm no different. Like I have stern ideological beliefs, and I've gained those via a multitude of different influences, ranging from my friends, the research I've done on the internet, and my own personal experiences. Different things make people happy, which is what makes them believe what they want to believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's important to remember that, right? Most people gain their beliefs because that's what makes them happy. Um,
Yeah, like their life shapes who they are.
exactly.
Okay.
Um, but I think what we need to focus on more is what would make the most people happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that whether or not people are stuck in their beliefs, hearing another perspective can help them question their own, their own ideals,
Mm-hmm.
and possibly change the way they think or treat others. Like for example, like when men aren't aware of how uncomfortable they can make women,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's a lot of men who aren't, and I think so long as we direct more attention towards these like those issues, then I think more people would be aware and would change the way they behave and change the way they think really. Um, you know,
Yeah, exposure to different viewpoints might affect their viewpoint.
yeah. Um, and I think like if no one talked about politics, we
Mm-hmm.
would only have immediate sources as influences, like our parents, our family, like our friends, and that's like such a small, pool of knowledge that we would pull from. It wouldn't be enough, right? We need more. I think now with the advent of the internet, we have the opportunity to research, what people believe thousands of miles away, or even thousands of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and we can relate those beliefs with our civilization. Um, I think the more exposure people have to different points of views, the more likely they are to see the world differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think another important aspect to bring up are the fear tactics that are used to keep people from exploring any doubts that they have about their own beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, when most religions say that God is testing you, and Satan is. I mean, I said most religions, but I'm mainly talking about Christianity here. And Satan is often going to coerce you into um, going against our Lord and Savior. And if you give in to those desires, and you give in to His will, then you're going to go to hell and yada yada yada. And I think that can be really unhealthy. You know, we need to encourage the exploration of those doubts because sometimes they can reveal an incompatibility between what they believe and what makes them happy. I think that they need the chance to explore other ideas that would fit their lifestyle instead of having to feel guilty or insecure about their life choices. I think that most people feel guilty about, having sex with more than one person or feel ashamed of it because their beliefs tell them that it's wrong. Or even the other people that believe, like in God.
Yeah.
A lot of them would tell them that it's wrong.
Well, so you're basically saying that people don't want to talk, or they don't want to leave the comfort zone because they're afraid, and they're taught to be afraid, and they're taught that it's right to be afraid of other beliefs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Um, which sucks because
Hmm.
a lot of those beliefs are based off of, like what's good for us naturally or whatever. But
Yeah.
I I don't think that that's just good for us naturally. I think we're all
Hmm.
different,
Yeah.
and you know naturally things make different people happy.
Yeah.
um but I also think that too many people don't aspire to be more than their own biology,
Hmm.
and they think that what's natural is always best. I think it's important that we evolve beyond our natural state,
Hmm.
because if we don't push towards evolution, then I don't think any progress can be made. I know that my beliefs will evolve the older I get, and it's important for me to embrace those changes.
Hmm.
Because I know that if less people talked about politics, then I personally wouldn't have the luxury of change.
Yeah. So I guess just backing it up here a little bit. So you were saying regarding the fear, because I know right now you're talking about how biology affects people's viewpoints, and that they want to, as we evolve and get older, our viewpoints change. But regarding the fear about it, do you feel that talking about politics helps overcome that fear for others?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it helps them explore the doubts versus having just one person constantly tell them, one person that they honor to constantly tell them
Hmm.
that exploring those doubts will mean the end of their life
Yeah.
or will mean, like an eternity of suffering. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Cool. All right. This is the interview with myself. The second question is, what does it mean to be liberal or conservative in 2018? So, starting off with where I stand, I identify as a centrist, though I do lean on the liberal side. I voted for neither Trump nor Clinton in the 2016 election, but in the 2018 election, I voted mostly Democrat. Hence why I feel like I stand where I do. Um, at least to me, then, being a liberal or being centrist more so means that I don't choose one side over the other. I don't align myself politically with one party or another. Personally, I believe in a government that regulates, but that shouldn't control everything. So, what I mean by that is people should have the freedom to live life the way they want without somebody controlling everything. But, if somebody's selling you something, there should be enough regulation in place such that they can't lie to you about it. And also, there are certain things that should be not run for profit, such as, say, jails. Those should not be run for profit. Or certain schools. I know that private schools do work, but when you set it up for that, there's always the possibility that can be a scam, hence, you need some regulation for that, such as what happened with Trump schools. I believe that, yeah, to an extent, people have freedom of choice. People should have the extent to choosing the way that they want to live. But with regards to the individuality, there's also the responsibility that there's the community to think of. And I believe that people don't necessarily always have the community in mind whenever they live, because it's always hard to keep that in mind when you're living. I feel that people tend to have selfish tendencies. And in that sense, you do need an external force to handle those selfish tendencies and to keep people on the ball with regard to the welfare of the community. Okay, so the question we'll be starting off with here is, why talk politics? What's the point when it feels like people are just so stuck in their beliefs, especially from the other side?
Well, like to me, the reason you talk about politics is the reason that you talk about you should talk about truth. You should try to get at truth with other people, and that's the practically the only reason to communicate, other than I guess like an egotistical kind of reason to do it. But that's the only reason to discuss it. There are people who will listen, because that's the thing is I think that the idea or the image is that people it's more stratified and people won't listen. But I think it's that people won't listen to a certain tone. I think if you treat them with respect, and I think if you show them that you're willing to listen to their ideas, I think most people, in all honesty, will have no problem doing that. But okay, sorry, I had to be refocused. Is that are we on the hating other people commonplace thing or
No, no.
sorry?
This is like a.
I want to cut that.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, like I said, we'll go back and edit this. But so with regards to that question, so it's essentially it's just to be able to like it's so long as you are understanding of them, it's like they should you should be able to just like talk and be understanding of each other.
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
mean, I mean, people should be able to communicate. Obviously, that's a very base and simple thing that everyone can agree on.
yeah,
But then it's like, if we can't communicate politically, then what is actually the point of the setup we have, which is a constitutional republic, which is has a democratic voting way of going about doing shit. What is the point of any of that? Well, people call it democracy, but I wouldn't call it that. What is the point if we don't communicate? Because then you're literally taking the information only from television, internet, books, essentially like senders, what William S. Burroughs would call senders. I was a big fan of him when I was a kid, and he had this expression, the sender cannot receive. And it's true. It's like if you're going to have a communication, that's fine. And people need to do that. But if you're just getting your information from other places, then it's not going to happen. And I think that's the reason why there's so much stratification is because people, and I'm not the first person to talk about, everybody knows about this bubble thing,
yeah,
where you make your own bubble and you look at your own shit and you just go, you know your own truth, so to speak. It's a terrible thing to say. I hate like that expression
yeah,
because there's no such thing as your truth, but that's what people are treating it as.
yeah,
And that's the reason that they hate each other so much, I think, because I mean, obviously, on another level, it's like your whole identity is generally wrapped up in your worldview. So it's very difficult to separate those. So when someone attacks that, you get very insecure and you get angry. Everyone does. But the point is, how do you react to that? And you ought to react to that by saying, does this mean that my logic is shit? Does this mean that I have to rethink things? Does this, you have to look at the issue. Why do you feel insecure about that? But everyone will feel insecure when their point of view or their worldview, especially like a moral worldview, is like shaken.
yeah,
But when you're only looking at sources that say that, then you're going to be even more so like that. You need to have a dialogue with somebody who at least has a variation of your opinion. This is the thing: is that usually within the left or the right, people have variations, and they'll have discussions on that. Where it's like, well, of course we both think this, but I disagree on this, and you could discuss it without hating each other because you recognize you're in the same group, so to speak.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's no tribal pride, and that's what it is. It's really tribalism. So,
yeah. And
so does that answer?
yeah, I suppose so. I guess just to make sure that I'm understanding like what you're saying. So it's essentially
Cool,
like,
cool.
essentially like it's easier to talk politics with people when there's a certain similarity between your guys' beliefs. But as you get further along the spectrum, it becomes harder and harder.
100%. It is required that you share certain principles
Yeah.
or certain concepts. Otherwise, you can't have the discussion.
So if
Like the second that someone says something like, free speech is great, but it's not, it's not as important as other things. I go, okay, I don't know if we can have a discussion because your perspective is not mine. And I think part of this question was, what's my own politics, or was that different? Was
so
that for later?
that's a different question. So like if we're
Okay,
done
yeah,
answering
yeah.
this right, we can go ahead and move on to the next one.
Well,
But
go ahead and ask, but yeah, get a more specific, because I like how you're getting specific questions. I like that. That's cool.
yeah. So
Redirecting.
yeah. So essentially, what you're saying here is like it's I again, just correct me if I'm wrong here as to what you're saying, but essentially what I believe you're saying here is that when you're talking to other people, if there's no common ground, then there isn't really anywhere to actually hold a discussion. So they're like,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, what if you're guys you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What if you're having a discussion about something as simple as like unions.
Mhm.
And one person's idea of what a union is just not what it actually is. Or
I think your sound just cut out. Hello? Hello? Oh, call dropped. I'll edit this. Yeah. Hello?
yo,
Uh,
hey,
sorry that the call dropped. So
it's all good.
yeah, so essentially, I guess just rephrasing the question, and I guess we'll start again for this
Can I
part.
take real
So
quick? I'm just gonna real quick smoke.
go ahead. Yeah.
Go on.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially, and I'll just re-ask it, and then we'll continue from there. So re-asking the question. So from what I understand, you were saying, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe you were saying that unless there's at least some common ground, it may be difficult, if not impossible, to hold a political discussion. Is that correct?
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. Or a discussion about nearly anything, really.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know, like, because you can. There's two things you can have from a discussion. You can share your taste,
Mhm.
like, oh, well, I like this. That's fine.
Yeah.
But in political discussions, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for the truth.
Yeah.
At least that's my conception of it. Now, some people, they have a more what in olden times you would have called like Machiavellian perspective, but now people generally call postmodern perspective.
Mhm.
And some people just look at it as, the conversation is all about how do I get to the end of what I want.
Yeah.
And I just don't take that viewpoint. And people who do, I think, are actually kind of crazy, like literally crazy, but in a way that's acceptable. It's
Yeah.
hard to explain.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, but generally, these discussions are about truth. Now, if you guys don't accept a certain definition of a certain type of truth, I mean, it's like, what are you going to fucking talk about?
Yeah.
What are you going to talk about? There's a great series of debates between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and they just argue. First, they just argue over what the fuck God means, because Jordan Peterson just doesn't define it the way that Sam Harris does. It's like, until you guys actually both know what you're talking about, there's no it's an interesting debate to listen to, but there's no debate happening really until you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, people got to know what I'll give you one example quickly, and we can move on this topic because
Sure.
I think we covered it a lot. But
Yeah.
one example would be like when people call social programs socialism.
Mhm.
I don't agree with this. I regard this as Republican propaganda, and basically Democrats over time have denied it because it isn't true, and then finally they said, you know what, fuck it, it's true. And this is a problem because these social programs aren't socialism. You shouldn't call them that, whoever you are.
Yeah.
And if you call them that, then we can label them under ideas that we probably shouldn't try, at least if you're in that camp. If you're a socialist, that's fine. But in other words, the understanding of what the word itself means has colored the whole perspective of it, because for certain people it will be like, I don't want to be anywhere near that. So,
That
so
makes
there, yeah.
sense.
So that's basically all I have to say on that.
Cool. All right. So, one. All right. So for the second question here, at least to you, what does it mean to be liberal or conservative in 2018? And let's preface that by starting off by asking, where do you stand on the political spectrum? And just digging a bit further, how did you vote in the past couple of elections when you voted?
Well, honestly, the last time I voted was for Bernie Sanders.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
So, I don't fucking give a shit.
Yeah.
I don't after that. I was like, well, what's the point?
Mhm.
And I mean, no. It's like the thing is, I know that sounds like bullshit. It's like, well, you're supposed to vote. It's like, yeah, I know. But I'm in California, and it's like things are going to go the way they're going to go for the most part.
Mhm.
And it's funny. Like my political perspective, it's hard to explain. I don't know where the fuck I am on the compass yet. I've been trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because I think if I did one of those tests, they'd probably put me somewhere around between I guess it's somewhere in the libertarian spectrum. Because generally speaking, like my views like are similar to them. It's just I don't consider myself a libertarian because I disagree on basically on two specific fronts, which is one, I don't think the government is evil. I just think it's like you can't get it get too big.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it evil. And then two, the government can't actually fix like no, sorry, I'm losing track of my stuff.
That's fine.
Two is they think that taxes or like any kind of taxation or social programs is somehow like a negative thing. I just don't agree with that. They seem to think like the thing is like the free market is great, and that's probably part of my political viewpoint is like I'm in favor of the free market.
Yeah.
And when I say free market, I mean mostly free market because there's no such thing as an actually totally free market.
Yeah.
But and not because like no one's allowed it to happen. If you actually had a totally free market, I'm willing to bet it wouldn't last very long. But because you need restrictions at some point. But a mostly free market generates quite a lot of wealth, particularly if you're talking about supply side economics, and that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But my politics are in that area, but at the same time, I see no reason why we can't have social programs as long as they're done in a very particular way, as long as they don't interfere with certain market forces. And then there are certain things that you should always remove from the market. Like if you we talked about this before, like off the podcast, but I think there's a conservative argument to be made for nationalizing the armaments industry, and anything above like guns. And so it depends. It depends on how you look at it. But see, so my own political perspective, it's hard. It's trying to explain it. The way I've explained it in my head so far is I think I'm a Hayekian liberal. But liberal means something different. So this goes into the question, which is like, what does it mean to be a liberal or a conservative in 2018?
Yeah. Well, I guess just to break down the same question that I asked both myself and Julian. So with regards to your beliefs, what do you believe is the role of government?
The role of government, I suppose, is to maintain private property, to maintain the law, to keep the people safe, in terms of like from a military context, to keep up public goods as opposed to services. So this would include the police, the fire department, libraries. A lot of basically what people would generally think that the government is useful for. But I'll tell you what it's not useful for. It's not useful for telling you like any moral perspectives. It's not useful for telling you anything about ethics really at all, other than we've structured it this way because it works pretty well. That's all I can tell you, which is great, but the government is a utility, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, it's not evil, but the more you feed something, the bigger it gets, and the more it wants to eat.
Yeah.
And that's the issue with government. But the government is basically like, it's interesting because there's this concept of like the social contract. You familiar with this?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically like the idea that we've all agreed to let the government do what it wants, and I don't really agree with that.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'm stating it wrong. Like maybe I'm misstating it, but because there's actually, to be fair, there's like a few different conceptions of it. But I think that's generally what it is that we've all said we submit to this. The problem with that is that would also mean we submit to market forces, which the same people would argue against. But in any case. The government is basically just this thing that we set up to maintain society, I guess. It's the only thing that I can think of. And it probably came out of wars, but that doesn't mean that it's inherently evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess just to verify that I'm on the same page here, government exists to sort of, I guess, protect the municipal services that we all sort of rely upon, but it shouldn't play any role in, I guess,
I should say one that I completely forgot that is exceedingly important is to maintain our rights, but those rights are not given by the government. Sorry, should have thrown that in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so it's to protect like our basic rights,
Yes.
but it shouldn't tell us how to think, essentially.
Certainly not in terms of a moral or even political perspective. As long as, I guess, from a political perspective, it can tell us what it thinks. Yeah. But it's certainly, I'm sure anyone would agree that the government shouldn't be allowed to just say this is the truth no matter what. The difference is that like if you're talking about math, The government can't lie about that. You can't fucking disprove that. But if you're talking about history, the government can make up anything that it wants. And
Yeah.
I don't like. I'm not one of like. I am very much against Holocaust denial laws.
Mhm.
I'm very pro First Amendment, very pro free speech in general, and the idea that you couldn't say something, even though I abhor what they're saying, it's like those people are fucking idiots, and probably some of them are trying to sell books. But just don't look at them, or maybe argue with them, and then it'll go away. There's way less Holocaust denial in America than there is in Germany. If you look into it, you'll find that's the case. So clearly, it's spurred on by it being illegal. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Where was I going? I don't know. I'm sure it said something in there. I'm sure there was some statements.
Yeah. There's statements in there. Yeah, I feel like that gives a very good.
We're recording, right? You started recording.
I started recording. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, if you're okay with with everything that you've said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for this question. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So for the second question, where do you stand on the political spectrum? How did you vote in the last election, just to get an idea?
Well, I guess I'm a radical leftist. I have non-traditional ideas, and I think that if we didn't cling to old traditional ideals, or if we allowed them to evolve, then we'd be in a much better place. Like right now, a huge detriment to our progression are the kinds of relationships that we have with each other. Like it's a reflection of where we are culturally. And I think that there are people getting into monogamous relationships or seeking monogamy because they believe that's what gives them value. And that's dangerous. Like, you shouldn't be getting into a relationship with anyone if you're going to rely on them solely for validation. Right now, a lot of people are seeking love without taking a step back and focusing on themselves. We are a community of people, and if the entirety of the community isn't focusing on making the world a better place, and instead relying on their children to do it, then what will that accomplish? It's really easy when living in a world that constantly romanticizes marriage as the key to happiness. So I can't really blame anyone for thinking that way because of that. So I kind of want to change gears here and stop talking about, marriage. Let's think about the relationships that we have with our bosses, right? They're, for the most part, like, impersonal. And I feel like, more than anything, they're there to intimidate or keep the workers in check, when I think that we can manage ourselves. Sorry, I guess I'm going on a tangent here. But the point I'm trying to make is that as of now, we need to focus on bettering ourselves so that we can build a better community. I don't think our celebrity worship, romanticized notions of relationships, and the push for power within a mini-hierarchical system that we call a company are healthy for a community. I also don't think capitalism is effective in making the most people happy. I think the more we work on ourselves individually, the better of a community we can have. As of now, though, most individuals are too focused on who they want to get married to and what would make them the most money versus what would be good for the rest of the world. I guess when it comes to how I voted, I mean, if any election comes up, I vote for whatever is going to ease up on people's bills. I would vote yes on rent control, and I would vote yes on housing the homeless. I think that the sad, unfortunate truth is that not having access to money in America makes it harder to live. People think they're free to do whatever they want, but they're really not. They can if they can afford it. That sounds more like a limitation based off of your income versus freedom. I guess that's mostly why I vote the way I do, because the more money an individual has, the more they'll have to focus on and better themselves.
I see. So just to make sure that I understand where you're coming from here, your viewpoint is that it's not so much that people should be focusing on themselves. People should be focusing on working together as a community. When we're talking about relationships, people should be not thinking about personal relationships, but rather about community relationships. Is that correct?
Yeah. Like, you can focus on your personal relationships on your own time, but that shouldn't be the ultimate goal that you have, right? That shouldn't be like like the end all be all of your life, you know, because the way we treat each other and the way our community is built and the way we cooperate with each other will have a huge effect on your life. And if you don't stop and think about, you know, the things that do have effects on your lives, even though you don't immediately see it, then like we're not going to be able to get anywhere. We're just going to stay stagnant and stay the way we are. And if you don't like the way things are right now, then you need to think about these things. So, yeah.
Okay. For the final question, is it rational to hate somebody with a different viewpoint than yours, considering in the current climate there seems to be a lot of that going around?
Yeah. Like this is tough because like I'm very adamant about staying friends with people who don't share my political beliefs, you know. And I try my best to uphold that. But recently, like that's changed. It can be hard to stay friends with someone who doesn't understand you. And sometimes you react so negatively towards them that you can't help but yell at them or get emotional, which sucks. But, you know, like they're your friends, you know? But you can't help that. Like I've met people who hate anyone pro-Trump, right? And is that fair? I don't think so. I think it can be dehumanizing, you know, because a person isn't just their beliefs, you know, and who they voted for isn't always a reflection of their character. I think that we should focus on why they think the way they do and what led them to make the decisions that we don't agree with. Because we have to think about why you hate that person beyond their beliefs, you know? You can't just make it about their beliefs if you're gonna hate someone.
Yeah.
But with that being said, sometimes people have beliefs that can lead to racism and oppression and murder, and most of the time they're not even aware of the impact that their beliefs have on other people's lives, you know. And I think that's when it can be frustrating. But how you deal with that frustration is ultimately up to you. Like, I'll be the first to admit that I definitely don't handle it well. Like, I've definitely yelled at a bunch of my friends over stupid shit. So if you find the frustration with a friend or acquaintance too much for you to handle, then you shouldn't have to associate with that person. I think it's really easy to get angry. Like when I start to get angry, I think about someone whose beliefs are solely based off of disrespect. And like their beliefs don't respect the existence of transsexuals, their beliefs don't respect a woman's autonomy, and their beliefs don't respect a person with a different skin tone. So like, why should I have to respect or consider like their well-being? Why should I respect them, you know? Like, I've had those thoughts more than once, but I try not to let that get in the way of how I treat them. Like that's when I try and calm myself down and remember that they've done nothing wrong. Like they're not at fault for being unaware or being afraid. Because sometimes it takes an entire community to shift a person's thought process, and nothing will get accomplished if we yell at them, right? But, you know, don't get me wrong, like it can be dangerous. Like when the person knows that it affects other people's lives, but they don't care and embrace the results of their beliefs. Like, for instance, white supremacy or white Sharia or like the incel movement or other movements just like them. Like, I don't encourage associating with those people, but I also think that we should empathize with their anger and question where it comes from, even though it's misdirected. Like, for instance, like incels are lonely and they're angry little balls of insecurity, but they blame women for their problems instead of the culture that a bunch of white men in power helped to create. Most people are afraid of what they don't understand. You know, like a major shift in culture can change someone's life. Whether or not it's for the better that can be scary, like, oh man, video games are going to go away if we're not capitalist anymore, or oh no, I have to share my resources. Like, can you guess which one of those would actually happen if we were a bit more socialist? But whatever. The point is, it's not always black and white, right?
Mm-hmm.
The world is a big place with a multitude of cultures and experiences and perspectives, and they're not always going to line up with yours, and that's all right. Just hang around the people who respect you and show love and care to the ones that are misguided.
Yeah.
Because, like, you'll never know, right? Like, it may help them change the way they think about people on the other side, or who believe, like, the complete opposite of what they do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So, and just to make sure that I understand what you said,
Mm-hmm.
and correct me if I'm wrong here, but basically you're saying that it's not okay to dislike somebody solely for their beliefs, right?
Yeah.
You should always look at a person from a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So the third question is, why do I think there's so much hatred now with regards to liberals hating conservatives, conservatives hating liberals, and all of that? Personally, I do my best to not hate people that have different views from mine, but at times, especially when things get emotional, it can be very difficult. And I think that's mostly what it is that in 2018, there's a lot of influence in trying to push people's emotional buttons, because when you're emotionally involved in something, you tend to have stronger beliefs. And when you're emotionally involved, it's easier for you to be manipulated because you're not thinking rationally. And you're more easily manipulated when you're forced to hate something, because if you hate something, you tend to act irrationally about it, even if when you think about it, there's no rational reason as to why you should hate it. For example, I know personally I tend to have tendencies to dislike, say, the South or something like that, not because the people are bad, but because I wouldn't want to live there because there's so much conservatism over there. But then earlier today I was watching a video where there was somebody doing an interview with somebody from the South, and the person seemed like a pretty good guy. And it just reminded me, hey, I shouldn't hate people from this. It's just with all of the radicalization of today, they try to make you want to hate the other side. And that shouldn't be the case. And so I feel that that's just what it comes down to. It's just come down to manipulation, a cause of fear of other people's beliefs when the fear may not be rational in the first place, and then the belief that people are more extreme than they actually are. The belief that you're centrist, whereas the other side is all radicals. So therefore, you're the good guy because you can think rationally, but the other side is the enemy because they are all irrational. And that tends to be how both sides, both liberal and conservative, tend to sell the other side these days. And it's something that we really have to fight hard to fight against, and also keep in mind. One. All right, so moving on to the final question.
Final round.
Final round. So in 2018, do you think it's okay to hate people of different beliefs, or why do you think it's so commonplace?
Well, as I said earlier, when somebody believes something other than you, particularly from a worldview perspective, you tend to be very disturbed by that person, unsettled to some. I mean, not everyone.
Yeah.
I think that the more experience and the more kind of empathy or acceptance you get in the world, you tend to get past. And then you have life experiences that show you, like, oh, the person that I thought was this was actually this, and so on. Mm-hmm. So people get past it, but I think it's a natural thing for people to go, like, if you don't think the way I think, there's something wrong with you. I mean, there was a time when everybody around you had the same religion, the same ethnicity, at least for the most part, the same like background culturally. There was a time it was like that, and I can't help but think that some part of us remembers that at some point. And more than that, like, there's a part of us that's designed to exist in that world, and that's a world where you're very fearful of anything that's like in any way. What shall I say? In any way deconstructing. It's probably the good word to use. Yeah. What you uphold as axiomatic. So if something is an assumption to you, like, no, of course this is true, and someone starts to say, no, I don't think it is, it's going to bother you. Whether your reaction, like, after that is proper is up to you, because maybe it's bothering you and it's bullshit. Maybe it's bothering you and you are bullshit. It depends. But that happens with everyone. I think the reason it's so like it is now is, like I said earlier, people who are essentially self-incubating in this crap. I mean, like, look, I like, it's funny, Fox News is obviously, like, they know what they're fucking doing, and they have this, like, propaganda atmosphere about everything, but one guy on the network that I actually do like is like, Tucker Carlson, and I like some of his stuff, but generally speaking, they create an atmosphere that is like a belief bubble, and once you're in there, everything kind of fits. And the other side does it too, but they don't see it as well because Fox is one fucking channel, and they have it everywhere. Really, they just don't see it that way. But people get into these bubbles of believing that, like, you know, how many news stories come out saying for sure this is the thing that's going to take down Donald Trump, and almost none of them do.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say that, it's like none of them have, but we assume that at some point maybe some of them will get more serious than they could. But it's like the vast majority of them have failed in any respect. But the news has pushed them generally as if they're all equally as good. Yeah. And like we had just recently, you know, we had the Kavanaugh thing. And in the Kavanaugh situation, it's like whatever you think about that situation, the way the media handled it was as if the second someone said something, it's like, oh, check this out. Oh, you know, blare it everywhere. Everybody look at this. Of course it's true. We're just going to assume it's true. And it's like, I'm not saying, obviously that guy lied, like at several points during the fucking proceedings. But as far as I'm concerned, like as far as I could tell, what's her name, Miss Ford also lied. But that's another matter if we want to do like a thing on that, you know. But like the way the media treated that, though, I think was improper. The thing is that this is seriously the issue. We need to go back to a time when the newsman or the newswoman is just like, and that's how it happened. I don't have an opinion. These are the events as far as we can tell. You know, like that's what I fucking like. Sorry, I moved some cookies. I think that's what most people want. And instead, because it's obviously bullshit that's pretending to be balanced, it's pretending to be fair. It's really, you know, a bunch of propaganda on both sides. Because it's like that, we go to the internet and people will seek out more extreme versions of what they already are, because we're not in an atmosphere where we can become more moderate or more balanced or more centrist. It's an atmosphere of division completely. And I think it's really fucking weird, because I don't want to go on for too long on this, but there's a really great book called Amusing Ourselves to Death by a guy named Neil Postman. And I think that what he writes about might be the reason this is happening. It might be. I'm sure if you were a Marxist, you'd blame like capitalism, some crap like that. Certainly corporatism doesn't help, but I would consider that to be slightly different, or like its own kind of evolution or its own thing. But I think the real problem might be that we are in a, you know, what used to be called a televisual frame of mind, but now with the internet is even worse and different. We're in a frame of mind now that's so different from what we used to be before that. A lot of people don't know that, like, in like the 1800s, farm kids, like 10 years old, would read Charles Dickens. Like, people in the country would read. It was normal for people who never went to school, never got a proper education, to read books. We all loved it. It was a typographic country. And after television, it changed everything. And I think that that's a big part of it, is that it's about entertainment, it's about flash. I mean, something that's interesting is that people have argued that the Founding Fathers might have not approved of advertising because they didn't have it the way that we have it now back then. Back then, generally, advertising was like, it does this exact specific thing, and then you get it and it does that. Or like, it usually wouldn't say on advertising, it's amazing. You know? So there's been arguments that, like, they wouldn't have approved of that and shit. It's like, I don't know, maybe not, but those are the things, that type of thinking, this type of weird entertainment, extreme, I hate to say MTV, but that's, I guess, what it is for kids, but for adults, it's the Fox stuff, and nobody watches MTV now, but you know what I'm saying. This frame of mind, I think, is the problem. Everything's going to be turned up to 11. It's kind of like the Star Trek reboot that they did in 2009, which I liked, but it was like, now everybody's a genius and they're amazing, and it's like, Sulu used, I hate to go all Star Trek, but just for real quick, Sulu used a sword in one episode, and in that movie, he was like a badass sword fighter.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So,
And I know what episode you're talking about. It's like the one like where like he was basically brainwashed to think he was a badass sword fighter and all that.
yeah, he was going crazy because they went through this area of space where everyone was crazy. It was weird.
Yeah. But I think I get the overall gist of what you're getting at. So basically,
Yeah.
you're saying it's so commonplace just because there's been so much like manipulation with regards to like the media. It's no longer just information. It's everything has a spin.
Yes.
It's no longer straight up facts. It's just everything's just like it's told to get a reaction out of you.
Right. Have you ever seen the movie Network?
I don't think I have. No.
It's one of the, like, I swear to God, one of the top, like, 20, maybe 30 movies you have to see before you die in my book. It's, like, one of the best films ever made. And it is about when the news started to be a division, because usually the news division of a network, they were expected to lose money because they actually weren't for money. And at a certain point in the 70s, it became a thing where they were, what is the word?
Yeah.
They basically, they were responsible to corporate. I think that's how you would put it. Like corporate, there was like, how much money are you making? What do you put? And so they started pushing crap that would make the money. And this version of the news has made everyone distrust the news, conservatives, even left-wingers. And it's just not conservatives or liberals.
Yeah.
I fear that I haven't properly described what conservatives and liberals are in modern times, but if it's good for you, it's good for you.
It's good. Yeah. But I guess going back to this question here, so I guess we've talked about why the hatred is so commonplace.
Yes.
At least to you, like if people have been gotten to show a reaction like where you feel there's no common ground between you and the other person, is it okay to dislike or even hate that other person if you feel there's no common ground?
I mean, when you say, is it okay to hate them, it's like, you might do it anyway, whether it's okay or it is, but like, I don't think it's okay. But that has nothing to do with like a political viewpoint. It's like anybody, it's cliched, but anybody who has had the effect on their life or has gone, most people I think understand that hate doesn't help you very much. And it's like, I'm sure that the founding fathers hated the redcoats and shit like that. So if like you're in war, you have to hate your enemy, and that makes sense. But the problem is that you're not supposed to be at war with your fellow countrymen. Yeah. So I don't think that you should hate someone for, like. And it's funny because it's like when you say that for a political perspective, it's like I don't consider, for instance, if someone's a Nazi, I don't consider that a difference of political perspective. Yeah. You know what I mean? I consider that like. The Dark Lord Sauron died, and you are now pledging to his name, or like you're one of the people in Harry Potter who's for Voldemort after he's gone. Yeah, like that's how I feel about that sort of stuff. Where it's like everyone knows what the Nazis are now. You can't argue for what they are. And I'm not saying that like I do think that the First Amendment says Nazis should be able to like do their little parades and shit like that. I think that's fine. Yeah. But the thing is, like, I'm for treating them like idiots. I'm for treating them like buffoons, and then, to me, you're going to get the proper results. You're never going to completely get rid of the Nazis because they're an ideology, so it's like around. So it's like getting rid of commies. You're not going to get rid of communists. They're always going to be around too. Yeah. But there's much less of them than there used to be, I would argue, and saying much even more so with the Nazis. Shit, where are we going with this? Sorry.
No, it's fine. Like basically, what you're saying is like you brought these guys up because like we were talking about whether or not it's okay to hate them. You said, well, like it's not okay to even like you maybe brought you still hate them, but it's like you don't feel it's okay. But like at the same time, like some people, it's just like there are certain ideologies which we'll never get rid of, and like you don't have a common ground with them, but they still exist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like, so the hate, and again, and I agree with you, it's like, that's why I said that at the beginning, it's like, it might not make a difference what you should or shouldn't do. You probably, in many cases, will hate them. And it's because of what you just described. This person represents something that your entire worldview is against. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because it's like beating up Nazis. It's like when people started punching Nazis, it's like fundamentally I have no problem with that. I just think it's a law and order issue where you shouldn't do that because we shouldn't beat people up without specific cause. Yeah. But it's like if someone's like a bad person, obviously it's like I get that. I get disliking someone when they are like stand for something that's basically evil. But the problem is like if you're in war, you know, and you're like again, going back to war, it's like you dehumanize your enemy.
Mhm.
And if you don't do that, then you become dehumanized. And so
Yeah.
I understand that perspective, but it's just not proper here. You should be able to talk to people. And the only reason that, and again, that's with Nazis, it's not the same thing. So
Yeah.
we're talking about liberals and conservatives, correct?
I guess we're just like we're talking
Or just
about
in general? Or just in general?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, well, just in general, it's like, even, so let's go with the most extreme example, and let's go with Nazis. It's like,
Mhm.
I don't really hate Nazis. I look at Nazis the way that Nazis looked at a lot of other races, unfortunately, which is I kind of look at them as vermin. It's like when I play video games, I kill them en masse, and it seems to be perfectly proper way to do it.
Mhm.
And I don't like, and I regard them like stormtroopers, as it's, you know, obviously the name came from them. I like to see them as this thing that you mow down. But in real life, if one was right in front of me, I doubt I would behave as the Inglorious Bastards do. You know, I doubt that I would do horrific things to these people. I would just knock them out, throw them in a locker, and let the people throw them in jail or something. And it's like, hatred doesn't really get you that much. Hatred will give you motivation to do certain things, but it's a fire that either burns you or burns itself out. You know, it's like you're ultimately you have to go with something else. So hatred is a great catalyst, but it doesn't sustain you in any way. And so you're only hurting yourself by hating these fucking dummies, because that's all they are dummies. And that's basically, it's just a personal, it's not even really political, it's just a personal perspective on it for me. I get why you would hate them. Like, and there are some people that I see them, including Nazis, that I hate. But, you know, the question is, how do you then respond to that, I suppose. Because, again, because you're going to have an involuntary reaction a lot of times. Should we hate the other people? No. We probably will most of the time. And so then you have to deal with your feelings on that, which is like, maybe calm down, you know, and step back from the situation and look at it in a more analytical way, because people are too emotional.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
You're really good at jumping in and directing the thing. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording if you have nothing else to say.
Yeah, no, I think that's. I mean, I feel like I didn't describe what conservatives and liberals were in modern times, though. That's the only thing.
Okay. Well,
Do you feel that I did? You can tell me.
so at least with that question, what I was getting more of is it's not so much like what your viewpoint of what it like where both people are, but it's more so of like where do you stand? Because I want to have each person identify where they stand, and by getting like together everyone's image of like their own personal thing, whoever's listening can get a viewpoint of like where everybody stands and what it actually means to be liberal or conservative in 2018, based off of how you view yourself in 2018.
Right.
That's what I was
Right.
going for. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Because the thing is, like, it's just nothing like. Thinking it where I feel the roots of it are, it's like people don't even seem to know anything about that shit anymore. Most of them.
Yeah.
The conservatives are a little bit closer to it because they're conservative, so in nature they're closer to it. But and I suppose you could say in nature, the left wingers are further away. But anyway, so yeah, so that's great. If you think that's great, and I'm hoping that that gives you a good episode there.
For sure. For sure.